let's just move them
Okay.
briefly to what we do now, because we could talk about this forever, and you make a very strong case for your position. However, here we are. We are not going to send troops to Ukraine.
No.
Neither is any other country
Nope,
in NATO.
we aren't.
What do you think? I mean, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. There are people who say, for example, that this is a major just bluff, that in fact he doesn't have the military power to really occupy all of Ukraine, that would be an absolute disaster for him, that essentially this is a almost cost-free attempt to just push for Russian influence. But at the same time, it's getting to the point where he can't back down now, really, absent some sort of concession, it seems to me.
Oh, I think he can always back down. I mean,
So what do you think is really going to happen?
So given that Putin has a permanent interest in undermining Ukraine, okay, and that this has been actually the invasion of Ukraine, I think is something he's wanted to do for a long time. In fact, we know that because in 2014 they invaded Crimea. That was a great success because nobody fought back and everybody was surprised. Then they invaded eastern Ukraine and they fought, and there was a pushback. And he tried to have a little coup d'etat in Kharkiv and northeast Ukraine, and that failed because they pushed back. And with a very bit of pushback, they gave up, and they just have this war running in Donetsk. But he's been thinking about invading Ukraine. I mean, even at that time, I just reread something I wrote at the time, and I was reminded about how much they published a map of Ukraine. Here's what it could look like, and they were talking about partition and so on. He's been thinking about this for a long time. You know, what stops him? Well, what stops him is the question of how high the price would be. So I don't believe that's a promise that we say, okay, Ukraine will never be in NATO. Will that stop him? No. That's unrealistic. I know the realists believe that, but it's unrealistic because really the threat from Ukraine is more profound than that. It's not about Ukraine being in NATO. It's about Ukraine being a sovereign democracy. Okay, so how does he? So what could? So given that he's going to always want to do this, how do we stop? Well, we have to raise the price. So the cost of invading Ukraine has to be too high. He thought, I believe the timing now is connected both to COVID, to the divisions inside the U.S., which he helped create in a small way, and to this belief that Europe was more divided than I think he understands. It's actually not as divided as he thinks, but that belief. And also to, I think, the fear that the Ukrainian military was getting better and Ukraine was consolidating. It was becoming more successful. So this is he's got to do it now or else it'll be too late because he wants to do it sooner or later. What stops him? Raising the price. Well, how do we raise the price? Well, there are several ways. One is we can send weapons. And obviously we're not going to, Ukraine doesn't have nukes and it doesn't have sophisticated anti-aircraft systems, but we can send them javelins. We can send them stuff that they can use to pick off Russian tanks, which actually a lot has arrived in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And this is, when you think how wars are fought nowadays, you can imagine lots of scenes of Russian tanks burning on CNN might be bad for morale at home. So this is not a small thing. Number one. Number two, we can do sanctions. But we can't do the kinds of sanctions we did before where we name a few people and then what happens is they get fake passports or they put their companies in their wives' names and they keep on doing business in Europe. No, we have to do real sanctions. And I don't know what exactly the White House is saying to the Kremlin. They keep saying, yes, we're going to do real sanctions. We're telling them real things. I don't know whether that's true. I don't have any special knowledge. But those real sanctions would be, no more Russian gas exports to Europe. Germany will get its gas from somewhere else. So that would cut off most of his money supply. Real financial sanctions. So those Russian Russian oligarchs are chucked out of London and their children are sent home from school. So real sanctions that affect real people and that have a real cost and price. That might impress them. Remember, he still depends to a certain degree on the acceptance of, there is an elite in Russia. It's very small. They're of course all afraid of him, but they're also kind of all afraid of each other. And there is a elite that he, might be, I think already is probably very upset by this because this is not good for business.